In the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Father God, thank you for being the kind God who hears and answers prayers, for being who you are and how you are. Thank you for being the God of true love, true life, true joy, and true peace. You are the God who is holy and who is perfect. Please, God, forgive me for my sins, known or unknown. And please bless this message. Let it be your thoughts, your words, your mindset, your result in your actions. Let me be blessed by it. Let the honor and the memory of my father and mother be blessed by it. And keep the evil one, the hater, the liar, the thief, the destroyer, Satan, away from the memory of my mom and dad, this message, and even myself, and prayerfully to whomever might be viewing this, because nobody is yet to reach forward. Nobody did when my daddy was alive, really, to help. One gentleman did, and I haven't heard from him since, and I thought maybe we would stay connected, but he's fearful because he has according to my dad, his wife wasn't, she felt threatened, and, my dad knew that, this person he was with, Donna Murphy, was dangerous to anybody. She would have anybody arrested or destroyed to keep them away from my father's, what money he had, and, life insurance policies and things to that effect. So what I'm going to do, because today is March 18th, 2026, I'm going to leave this message just a half an hour. I know it's delayed from what I had been doing, calling these life updates on March 1st. But you have to understand, and I had a nightmare again last night, there's sort of three phases to my trying to accomplish, getting an investigation into the death of my dad, which I know was highly suspicious and likely, criminal. My dad was fearful of it. I witnessed the abuse myself. He relayed it to me many times. I have evidence of it. I'm still going through. I just played a couple of messages the other day. I still have about 700 more messages. Actually, I think 730 or 740 to go through. I just got some more technical equipment back to hopefully, play some of the other ones, because, again, there were 6 that I heard, phone conversations, beside all the messages and conversations my dad had, where she was throwing knives at him, threatening him like a cult leader. I mean, I heard it myself. She even said, would you kill your own children for me? And my father, on his knees crying, actually said yes, like you would in a cult. And, and she totally, it was, if you hear some of the situations, and I've studied cults. So I'm going to speak about them for a minute, because I watched another special on a cult last night with this guy Spriggs from back in the 70s out of Tennessee. I mean, I've studied the, Heaven's Gate, Jim Jones, Scientology, the Manson family. I even had correspondence with Leslie Van Houten, who was recently released when she was incarcerated. And then there's the religious aspect, and I'll mention that briefly, because there is a war going on now that I'm against, actually, although I'm a supporter of President Trump. But I'll just speak to that quickly as a preaching point, because it comes up later. But human beings, by their nature, I mean, these are really spiritual wars. And the three, religions at war here are Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. And if you studied all of them like I have, you realize basically when it comes to life and death and war, the Jews are, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, so they don't have any problem, warring and murdering people. The Christians, I have to say, for those who, purport to turn the other cheek and were commanded by Jesus to turn the other cheek, they're very hypocritical, and they don't. They'll act, unrighteously and kill people. And then the Muslims, who I've studied the Quran, actually the Islamic people are in many ways more godly than Christians and Jews, especially the women. There's some of the godliest women on the planet, actually. But Muhammad, there's, the part of scripture is, and there's always, there's two sides to everything. There's a good anger, there's a bad anger. Muhammad's anger was an unrighteous anger, in that he and the Quran taught to, eradicate and get rid of evil. You have to destroy the enemy. You have to murder the evil people. So, and I know there's evil in every religion. Like I said, those three, I mean, and I've studied, everything from Buddhism to Hinduism, to even atheism, you name it. So having said that, that's why there'll always be these wars, these spiritual wars, because one way or another, those three major religions all, feel they can justify, warring and murdering, and, even if it's in quote unquote self-defense. When, if you listen to Jesus, he said, even when it came to self-defense, turn the other cheek. Everybody should end up basically being, a martyr. And I have a saying, the goal in life is to die having never killed a life. I mean, and that's whether it's the plant life or the animal life. But again, having said that, why, like I said, and this is a 47 up here above me, I am a supporter of President Trump. I mean, the reason I'm mentioning this is, and I'll just say this other last thing, it's like people having a gun. If you have a nuclear weapon, it's like a person having a gun, or whatever your weaponry is. So the way God, would probably, first, he doesn't want anybody having guns. We should all be living in peace. And if everybody just believed that God was the true God of love, life, joy, and peace, we would have it. But it can, Satan, sorry, Kitty. Kitty, come on, Kitty. I love the kitty boy, but he always gets a, all right, Kitty, come on. I got to leave it. He popped right in. Did he scare you? Whoever might be watching. All right, so having said that, let me continue on. He's going to want to sit here, I guess. Kitty, I can't concentrate, Kitty, and speak at the same time. I love the kitty boy, but he loves me. He's got to cuddle up to me for safety and for affection. All right, Kitty, come on. Please take a seat. All right, sit. All right, so what I was going back to about the message about, warring and evil-mindedness is that, the Christians decided to help the Jews in this case to attack the Muslims. And there's always going to be those wars because of those, they are religious wars, they are spiritual wars. And, the devil knows, people are dying, his time is short, and he's always going to be combating God here on this earth. So, the reason I mention that is because, and I've experienced this, when you get down to the forensic study of people at their core, basically, especially, well, even women, men. I mean, and I've joked about this before, and this certainly happened to my dad. And again, I'm going to keep this to a half an hour, and I'll relay, the updates on trying to help, honor him and what he even said. He said, Mark, don't let her get away with it and tell my story. Because he knew she was going to, bring destruction and devastation to him. She ripped him off, basically stole and cost him everything he had, including his life. She had me falsely arrested 3 times. I've already mentioned those stories. But anyway, so what I was saying about these things is when you get down to it, instead of people, doing godly things like, truth and righteousness or, the characters of God or justice, they end up basically siding or, morally, aligning with basically 5 things. One is their gender. If women always, 9 out of 10 times they'll want to, they'll take the side of another woman. I mean, if you left a woman on on this planet alone, and there was just one man and one woman left, and God said you can only have one moving forward, believe it or not, 9 out of 10 women nowadays would take the other woman. And I don't mean in a sexual way. I mean, they would, even if they could be fruitful and multiply with the other man, they wouldn't, with the male, they wouldn't, or even if not, but they just, they'll side with women. And I had a, I'll mention that for another reason. The second thing they do is they take their so next to their gender, they'll side with their race. Well, blacks with blacks, Indians with Indians, whites with whites, Latinos with Latinos. I've seen it everywhere in life. That's what they do when it gets down to it. The third thing would be their religious beliefs, right? Jews work with Jews. They hire Jews. They'd rather marry another Jew. Christians the same way. Islamic people the same way. Whatever the religion. You're my religion. You're my gender. You're the same ethnicity. I'm going to side with you. The fourth thing would be their political beliefs. Basically in America, we have Republican, Democrat, Independent. Most Democrats, they're a certain way. Most Republicans, they're a certain way. So, they'll align with those 4 things. And then the fifth thing I used to jokingly say is a sports team. You don't like my team, I'll kill you. And people would do that, basically. Or you like my team, well, I like you. I'll give you the job because you like my favorite team, whatever the case may be. But really, the fifth thing is probably, speaking of job, their job. What do you do? What's your life about? What do you like to do? Or what do you do for work? What do you do for fun? Oh, you're a surfer, I'm a surfer. I'll agree with your religious beliefs, or I'll side with you with regards to this legal matter or this life or death situation. Or if it's a job, oh, you're an engineer, so am I. So having said that, that comes to point because, as my father, while he was alive, people weren't defending him. I mean, there's nobody was like my dad, and there's nobody like me. I know how godly we are. I'm not saying we're perfect. I know how talented we are, how loving we are, how hardworking, how intelligent, how charismatic, how blessed we are, our relationships with God, but again, for, most people, it's those 5 things, but you can really get it down to the core of 2. It's either the, God above, the God of heaven, the God of love, life, joy, and peace, I said, or the God of money. So, as I've said before, you know the story. I think if you've listened, I don't know why, and I do know why nobody's helping, but they didn't help when my daddy was alive, and people cared less about me than they even did about him, especially, because she had him brainwashed. There's Donna Murphy, because my mom, if you know the story, died October 17th, 1982. But before, she died, my dad, they were just regular people, so to speak. Regular jobs. They built an empire of family, of finances, of friends, of sound mind, no criminality. I mean, just a great, that's what you're supposed to have. That's the kind of life you're supposed to have with your wife. You meet, you mate, and God blesses you, and you grow, all these things that really matter to God here on earth together. Now, after my mom died, this gold digger, 21 years younger than my father, the only money she probably had was from this death of her husband. I saw where she lived. She lived in a decrepit little slum kind of place, down in Rensselaer, New York. She had 4 children. She had divorced her husband, or he divorced her. You're not supposed to get divorced, so already she's a sinner. You're not supposed to even, you're not supposed to remarry a divorced woman. My father did. I warned him. I said, Dad, biggest mistake. You will lose it all. God told me. And of course, God doesn't lie, and he, definitely doesn't. He's never lied to me. But of course, my dad, she started grooming him and gaslighting him right from the beginning. Immediately, worked her way into, working for him. That's all she ever did. She got a job working, with his publishing company. Then once they got married, she laid claim to, all his money. She even did it with me. I've mentioned the story. Had me falsely arrested for stealing a truck. I said, do you want to apologize? She said, nope. You and your father need to know. I own all this one day. It's all mine. I'm in control. You can, and she used the word F off. And if I need to have you falsely arrested again, I'll do it. She basically, because she knew she had me falsely arrested the first time. So she ended up doing that 3 times. The second time it happened, I told the story. I'll tell it again quickly. My dad was writing his autobiography. I said, I was homeless at the time, because of course she was going through all his money and not allowing him to help me in any way. Even when it came to writing a review for his book, I said, Dad, you want to spend $1,000? Give me $500. I'll write a good review from a godly Christian perspective, which my father is, and I was very devout at the time. I said, and then I can have, for $500, Dad, that'll give me a roof over my head for a very extended amount of time. Well, she was against it. She went with some Jewish company called Kirkus. You can read the review online. They write a negative review panning my father's book. But that was her. She always made unwise business decisions. Everything was about her making the money off my father. Like my dad told me, he sold his property up into 4 plots. The house for $650,000, a plot for like $250K, another plot for $90,000, another for like $40,000, and I think one for $60,000 or whatever, totaling $1 million. She put most of that money in her secretive bank accounts for her. Didn't let my father spend his own money. And then even when it came to a business venture they did together like Bingo City, which the video's online, my father said, Mark, you know what? She embezzled. She filled out paperwork incorrectly. She embezzled, and he took a felony rap to protect her. Now, of course, other people who were involved, like his son Joseph, who's an atheist, was an atheist as soon as my mother died. He fell in love with money. Money became his god, but like I said before, these people who would fall for what she was doing, and getting in this cult-like control, they were either ungodly, unintelligent, just ignorant, or just so, empty-headed, I guess, if you will. They'd allow themselves to be, controlled by her. And they're so, and lovers of money. Because if you look at the people in, like, my father's children, who my father was all very disappointed in, and I don't blame him, she most befriended the ones who had the most wealth. Joey, Lisa, Amy, and Susan. The ones who didn't have the wealth, Tony, because she's, partially mentally ill and not, as intelligent as the other children. She didn't have wealth. Me, I'm just being godly and ministerial. I'm not into wealth. And Brad is an artist, a musician. So, and of course, they are also in many ways, Julie too, I guess. Julie didn't have a lot of wealth. I'm sorry, I should throw Julie in there because she married just a normal guy, postmaster or postman or whatever he is. And the people who got along with her least were the 4 who, were essentially the ones who cared about money the least, and the ones who in many ways were the smartest and the godliest, okay? The other ones, no. So she could beguile them and trick and trap them, and she did. And then like I said, the gold digger thing was bad enough, but then it was like, you can look it up. It's not hard to figure out. I mean, the police were called. I had to call them. My dad called them. I have hundreds of messages. I'm not going to put inserts up here. I don't think we're graphics or whatever you want to call them up here where I put them before. But you can just click on the link to A Cult of One, or now called A Cult of None, because my dad is gone and just listened to his own messages, the evidence I heard. I'm not lying. I heard her throw things at him. I heard her threaten him. I mean, there's a picture of him with a bloody nose. I don't know if I cut it off when I edited, but and on this new version, these new recordings I have, she was screaming at my father, "Do not show Mark that videotape. You're going to get me in trouble." And my father there with a bloody nose, saying she hit him in the nose. Now, I know sometimes, again, he got bloody noses because she had him over-medicated with blood thinner. I mean, was totally controlling his prescriptions. She had her daughter, who's not, who's a physician's assistant, it's illegal for her to give my father medicine. She was giving him medicine. My father very many times feared he was being poisoned, was sicker than he always, normally had to be because of what was happening to him with that. And, but that's the kind of control of the things that she did. And even with something like, what was I going to say? Like bingo, where she, she's what I was going to say. I missed the point. I was going to say something about, bingo, the videotapes. So I'll tell the story again about the threatening of the arrest. So when going back to this Kirkus thing, so I was despondent, depressed, homeless. I made a stupid criminal mistake. And I didn't think I was being I figured, I said, well, you know what? Some guy leaves his thing. Maybe he'll come back for it. He left his suitcase. We're in the lobby at the hotel, but somewhere off, like basically the hotel. And I said, well, let me just look through there and see what's in there, trying to get supplies. And there was a credit card, and I used it right next door. It wasn't hard to catch me. I'm not a criminal by nature. So I had to spend time in jail for that. I mean, I'd take more responsibility for that. And then, of course, the third time, she took out this protection order with this, in East Greenwich, New York, this, where her husband died in a fire. Like my father said, Mark, she killed him. He alleges maybe, that the fire was to cover up the murder. Or she said, we were all told that your husband committed suicide, because Donna's a habitual liar. But obviously, whether he did, I don't know if he killed himself in the fire or what, or the fire was there, or just, I mean, I don't really hear too many stories of people dying in a house fire in their own fire. When the house is on fire, the alarm goes off, or you sense the smoke, you get out. I don't know. But again, it was hard to find the information. She's always trying to sequester information, and that's, what I was going to say led to, because after the third arrest, and I'll go back to the fire story and the bingo, the third arrest was, she took out this false protection order with this corrupt, incompetent, ungodly judge, Elizabeth Walsh, in family court, filed in default. I didn't know about it. My father never knew. She never told him, never told me. She lied in it. I mean, the court is so evil and incompetent up there, just like the police chief. I'll get an update on that story. And she knew all the people up there, and she had been working them, grooming them. I mean, of course, she's riding around in my father's BMW, having a great time, spending his money, acting all this and that, and all she was doing was making money off my father. She never, she wasn't smart enough, talented enough, hardworking enough to do anything on her own. She got it off of the first man she was with, the second man, and my father even said a man before both of them, and then I'm sure a man already after. He had told me before, Mark, she leaves me here stranded and hungry and thirsty, and she goes to Proctor's Theater, where they ended up living finally, in Schenectady, chasing rich people, so I'm not sure how long I have. I'll go quick. So having said that, she filed this protection order. And then when I went to help my father, because he wanted to divorce her, and she said, I'm the caregiver. Mark wants his father to divorce me. That's not a loving wife. That's somebody who's using and abusing a man who knows that if he leaves, she loses the prestige of his name. She loses his veterans benefits, his Social Security benefits, life insurance policies. He could get half of his money back. This money she's gotten hidden in these secret bank accounts, which I know she had. And like my father said, and you can see she's got a P.O. box online. You can just look up now online now. Why do you need a P.O. box if you're, living with a man, your husband? And she was always up to that. That's why my father said, Mark, call Social Security. She steals my check. I can't even get the brand of root beer I want. I can't get a lottery ticket. I can't even go buy, go to the dollar store. She takes all the money. I send it. You have it sent to the mail. She takes it. You have it direct deposit in the bank. She takes it. And she did it with the same thing with the home sales, the same thing with Bingo City. Now, going back to Bingo City, another arrest situation. When and you can see, what was put up there on Bingo City, where you can hear my father saying, some people are sick with greed. And I know she was. I mean, I saw it. I had a garage sale up at my father's house. I said, Dad, and I'll get back to the bingo store. I said, Dad, everything I sell, because my father had stuff from long before he even was with my mother, and he's like, well, she's making me sell the home, and I said, well, Dad, I got to get some of my stuff off of there. So, I said, well, let me sell off some. So the first thing I sold, I said, Dad, we'll split it all 50-50. I sold something for $10 that was either him or mine. And I'll never forget, I'm standing outside where, like this portico type of thing, where his front door is, and she's in the house, and you can see out the kitchen. And I hold out, I took the 2 5s, and I handed a 5 to my father. She came storming out of the kitchen, flung open the kitchen door, the door that leads between the kitchen and the outside, ripped the $5 out of my hand. My father were like, she almost hit my father in the nose with her elbow and said, that's my money. All the money up here is my money. That's not his money, it's my money. I'm like, you gotta be kidding. And my father said, some people are like sick with greed. I mean, I sold something that was mine. She said it's half the money's hers. Or it was something in my father's from like 60, 65. It was an old picture or something. She didn't meet him until like mid-1980s. But of course, that's all hers, she said. And that all rang true. Throughout his life, all she did was use him and abuse him for money. So when I mentioned about the Bingo City, when I went, for a year on FaceTime, I called my dad. I said, Dad, let me come up there. When you die, she's not going to give anything to anybody. She has no value for anything sentimental. I said, she's going to sell it all. I said, but to me, those videotapes are valuable. They're our lives. They're our family. My father and I very much valued video. So for a year, I called him up on FaceTime, and you can see these things. I have images of me, because I knew, I said, Dad, can I please come up there? Oh, of course, son, you can. Of course you can copy the videotapes. I'll even help you. I'll give you a video, whatever. I'll do anything you need. But I said, I know, Dad, but it's not going to be that way when I get there. You watch. But I recorded it to make sure. And sure enough, I go to his house. She comes storming in when I was scheduled to meet with him. I take the videotapes, taking my father Cracker Barrel for lunch. She calls my father and does this cult thing with him. And the next thing I know, my father is screaming. They almost called the police on us outside of Cracker Barrel. You're stealing my videotapes. I go, Dad, are you... He even gave me a VCR. I said, here's the VCR to take them. No, Donna says you're stealing our videotapes. You're stealing my possessions. You're stealing my property. I'm going to have you arrested. Right now, I'm going to have you arrested. I said, Dad, and I knew. That's how she controlled him. I mean, for a year, he gave me permission to borrow videotapes. Now, why? I can guarantee she knew, because she monitors and controls everything, control, perspecticide, that's what it's about, brainwashing, and was concerned, I guess, that she was going to be exposed in Bingo City, which I knew. That's why I never got involved. I mean, she duped Joey. Of course, he's ungodly. He's all about money. My father knew. He admitted it to me before he died. He admitted. I have it somewhere on recording. I know. I put my hand on a Bible, put my hand on a lie detector, put my hand on, truth, strap me up to a lie detector, whatever. But she knew those Bingo City videotapes were in there. So she said, well, I know what, falsely accused Mark of stealing, get those tapes back. And, and I didn't get to see my father the rest of the summer. He threatened to throw me in jail. You believe that? And then he even threatened to sell my grave plot. Now, my father would never think that on his own. She said that. Because, of course, first she wanted the money, and I guess apparently one of his other daughters, this one, Julie, she said she threatened, according to Julie, to do the same thing with her grave plot. Again, the two she disliked the most were me and Julie. But me especially, because I knew the truth more than anybody. I knew she was using and abusing my father, and I knew that his life, he was going to lose it all. And she stole like I said, she stole his mind, in a sense. She stole his family, broke his family apart, stole all his money, gave him a criminal record, his only felony he's ever had in my life. My father was, a law-abiding person. She had me falsely arrested, and there's a good chance, because like I said, you don't have to be a rocket scientist, as they say. She neglected him. I mean, there was a situation, I said, where she was out on vacation, because she was always on vacation, running around with other men, my father said, or out at Proctor's, or just with her sisters or her kids. Just leaving my father home alone all day, give him a plate of food, leave him a plate of food in the morning like a dog, come back whenever she wanted, usually by Friday night, before going out again, doing whatever. And that's when they argued. And there was a time where he almost died in a fire. It wasn't a fire, it was a false alarm because she didn't maintain the fire alarm and he couldn't find her anywhere. He called her repeatedly. She's up on the beach in Maine doing her thing. She neglected him. He could have been laying there with a heart attack. She's nowhere to be found. But of course, I'm trying to help him, but I have this protection order. And my father kept using the word ridiculous. He's like, Mark, how can they do that? I go, Dad, she's in bed. She's in, and it's definitely conflict of interest with this judge, but of course they didn't want to hear that. And in East Greenbush, and this will be one of the updates, this Elaine Radzinski or something, I guess she's leaving the force now, but she's friends with Joseph, and one of Joseph's friends, this bully cop named Maiano, but that shows you their relationship. She doesn't even take this guy's, her own Italian husband's last name, another sign of disrespect. Even you can see when Donna DiBello spells her name, she uses the lowercase b. She doesn't even spell, and I don't even say Donna DiBello. Donna Ricardo Murphy is her name. But she took my father's name, doesn't even spell his own name, his last name. My father's name, beautiful last name, meaning the beautiful, with a capital B like I knew to spell when I was 2 years old. She doesn't even spell it correctly. On all, whatever forms, most of the time incorrect. Do you believe that? Won't even give the man the dignity to spell his last name correctly. Well, anyway, so, my father goes down to this Elaine Radzinski or something. He kept calling her Angela. He kept forgetting her name. I didn't really know her name at all. I said, I thought her name was Angela too, till I had to look it up. Twice asked this person, said, you know what? Like OJ, or Nicole going to the police with OJ Simpson, saying, you know what? This woman's going to kill me. In my father's case, she's beating me up. I want to leave. She's like holding me captive in a sense. This Elaine calls Joseph DiBello and says, what do you want me to do, Joe? Really? How about doing your job? Well, sure enough, Joey in his ungodliness and lack of wisdom and his, he has total prejudice against me. I mean, he thinks I'm like the biggest scumbag on the earth. Fredo is his terminology. He calls people, because he respects money. He's got no, he's too much pride to ever be apologetic to anybody. Too ungodly to know the truth. He'll never... like I said, he's next to her. He's the most evil person I've ever met. He has helped me on 4 occasions, but other than that, last 35 years, most evil person I've ever met beside her. So instead of doing her job, this Radzinski woman, and my father begging for help and letting this, corrupt court order be established, and then even citing harassment because I was reporting the crime, that's considered harassment. And then, of course, opens the thing saying, is Mark a danger? Yes. Really? That's funny. I don't carry a weapon. I'm not like that. I don't kill animals. I don't eat them. I don't swear. People don't hear me lie. I'm a minister. I'm preaching all over television, 40 different shows. I just did a thing on CNN, basically my 40th thing, and celebrated just for what it's worth. Not to say celebrated, March 3rd or 5th, 35 years, no even aspirin, no drinking, no drugs, nothing. But of course, I'm a danger. Never shook her hand, never bumped her by accident, never hugged her, never went to their wedding, nothing. I try to avoid her because I know how evil she is. But of course, lies to the government. Yeah, Mark's an evil threat. Now, of course, like I said, between her and her wickedness, this, family, this cult family she had duped and their support, my poor father being so weak and so victimized, he's got no choice. What's he going to do? If he's with her, she beats him up. And if he does something else to hurt her, he's got nowhere to go. His children wouldn't take him in. Multiple times, he says, I'm going to go live with Amy. I'm going to go live with Lisa. No, Donna always got put that, asunder. And when he wanted to live with me, take out the false protection order, get it granted, keep Mark and his father apart, and still threaten him. And I heard it. 10 times she would deal with him. 9 would be threatening, menacing, totally, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to you're not getting any money. I'm going to beat you up. You're not going to eat. I'm going to deny you food. I'm not going to let you do this. And I told you, there was one call, my father's basically on the, kitchen knees, because she told him, get on your knees. She's in the kitchen. She said, who's your master? Who's your, who owns you? Who's your leader? And he's like, she's like, scream it, say it louder. You are. And then she's like, and what would you do for me? Everything. And would you, if I needed you to kill your children, would you kill your children? I would. I mean, that's a cult. And I swear to God on the Bible, on my mother's grave, my father's grave, I heard it. My father, he was, there's 6 times, like I said, he couldn't, he butt dialed me, like they say. But that, and then the other messages, threatening him over money, $200. If you don't sit the F down and shut the F up, you know what's going to happen to you, and I'm not effing feeding you. I'm not giving you any more of my money. Then you hear the one recording, just click on the page, where she says, you're so GD cheap, you don't contribute anything, really? A 90-year-old man, she's gone through every bit of his money, every dollar, now trying to get to his last Social Security check. Really? After 35 years with somebody? Is that how you speak to somebody? What does that tell you? But these people, these supporters my father's own children betrayed him. And then I'll get to to wrapping up here. Let me see how much time's left. Okay, well, it's 30 minutes left, so I'll just go 5 more minutes. So speaking of this Elaine person, and here's the 3 phases that I have to go through that make it difficult. Number 1 is the emotional damage. It's very difficult for me to have to go deal with evil people because they usually will pour salt in the wound. My father and I discussed it all the time. Is Mark, don't bother calling the cops when she beats me up. They don't do anything. She lies. She locks me in a room. She makes my life worse. And these cops, in blue, woke, Democrat, female governed New York, no go. And of course, the things, like I said, they ally with. They don't, the only time you can get somebody to at least be, relatively helpful to my father, they've got to be a middle-aged white Italian. Basically, that's it, Republican. If you're not, forget it. Because they're going to lie with, like I said, their gender, their race, their religion, their political beliefs, and, what do you do for money? Oh, you know what? You marry a man for money, that's okay. We all do it. I even had my aunt who betrayed me say to me, because I knew she'd get down to it. She said, Mark, I'd rather see you in jail than her. You got yourself thrown in jail those times when you got arrested, like even outside the bank, going to help my father. Donna set the whole thing up. My father's crying. He wants to go to the bank. He wants to meet with his lawyer. He wants to go to the racetrack. He wants to eat. He wants to check out the new apartment. I was looking for him, new home, places to live. She sets the whole thing up, and I'm in jail. I get thrown falsely in jail again over her wanting to have this money, every last dollar of my father's. And how can that not be true? Let's see, he died. There was no will. He had no money, basically, no life insurance. I got 3 pieces of paper. Now, having said that, like I said, with this, this Helen, who, she always had a thing toward my father, and eventually has now taken it out on me. Thought my father wasn't good for my mother. Really? They built an empire together. He gave all of them jobs. I even saw, and I said this to her, I confronted her the last time I saw her in person with this. I said, and I saw it. He even hired her husband, Steve, her son, Steve. Most of these Burek relatives, my father gave them all a chance, and not all of them were good employees. I used to work with them. I know. And then she said, what? She said, well, Mark, this $1 million, she didn't steal it. Your father gambled it all away. Really? Okay, well, anybody knows my father he was a millionaire every year of his life and always made money gambling and didn't do it that much. And it ran a publicly held company. That's how he made his money. But of course, she says that. Then she says, I'd rather see you in jail than her. But of course, she had to take the side of the female, and in this case, the wife and the mother. See, this Donna gave birth to 4 children, and she's, this Helen promised my mother, Dorothy, she would help her, she would watch over her family. And it's easier to ostracize me, who's speaking the truth, who's defending the righteousness of my dad, and to falsely accuse me and segregate me from these other 7. And again, they're all led by Joseph because he's a gazillionaire, and he wants to leave this Donna $800,000. In his will, and threatened me already to take away the will, my whatever he would leave to me, and that's the second time he did. But of course, I can spend my last 50 grand, all my money I ever, and 50 grand for me was a lot, all of it on my father. She took it all. My father, all the money I had to spend, not all of it, like 30 or 40 of it, 40,000, spending on my father, helping him. Airline tickets he never got on flights, doctor's appointments, Ubers, you name it. My transportation, homes, down payments, you name it. But they still want to support her. So having said that, checking up, because I did have that at the beginning of March with this, what I was getting to is the reason it's hard for me. The emotional part of doing that. 2 is still trying to, make a living myself, put food on, my table, keep a roof over my head. I have to do my work, whether it's sports or whether it's, TV work or, helping other people or consulting or, something creative, selling even off some of my personal belongings. I have to worry, or help I get from Uncle Sam, whatever the case may be. I have to, put a roof over my head, so I have to take time to do that. And then, of course, there's, like I said, well, the three. Oh, and then anything I might want to do on my own, my own work. I kind of already mentioned that. But even, I only take one day off a week anyway, so I work like basically 96 hours a week. But having said that, like I said, the emotional trauma of just, still mourning my poppy. Last night, my poor popsicle, last night I had another nightmare. They're all basically the same. She does something to hurt my father and me and her supporters. And I wake up screaming or crying, no sleep, tired. It's getting hot now here in Las Vegas. But having said that, and then of course, every time, if I don't get that type of person on the other line, I even called the government the other day in Washington. Cop basically hangs up on me. Can you explain the situation? Yes, boom. Didn't even want to hear it. Really? So I did write the Attorney General in New York. I don't have a lot of faith in Letitia James. And this Elaine person, I guess, is leaving the office of police chief where she was derelict in her duty. And, and they're looking for a new police chief. So I don't know what's going to happen with that. The other alternatives are, again, I'm going to, I don't care about the money necessarily, but, I'm going to have to do something because Easter's coming up in 2 weeks. I promised my daddy, I shouldn't, my dad, the only peace, no justice, no peace. My dad was kind of saying the same thing. And I said, Dad, and I kind of gave her a break. I said, Dad, let's not even see her in jail. Let's just get you away from her. Your life is more important. But of course, that my father wanted to see her in jail. And I know why. I know why. Whatever happened to him before the ambulance was called was either criminal, neglect, or even murderous. I have to find out. Nobody wants to tell the truth. Nobody wants to help. I'm estranged from, I don't communicate with any of them because every one of them let my father down, let him lie in that bed dying before they even decided to call me. His godly minister, his firstborn son, his best friend, his biographer, the one who went to jail 3 times in defense of saving him from her, and would do it again, and multiple times she threatened to have me arrested, and basically guns pointed at me by these minions who served her in the East Greenbush Police Department, and this Mayano guy and Joseph, his money, lying, and oh yeah, I'll help you guys, and then he betrays both of us. Oh, she's not abusing him. Oh, okay, Joseph. Too busy making money to listen to the messages. All of them. But anyway, so in closing, I'm going to follow through. I'm not going to reveal everything, what I'm going to. But again, until she's fully investigated and jailed, because you have to jail somebody, because even like my aunt said, oh, Mark, you got to let this go. It's going to make you like cuckoo. Really? Go to hell. You mean what? Somebody kills, like you're allowed to kill people. If you don't catch them, you just let them go the rest of their lives? Really? You just turn your cheek on what? Every crime? Really? All sinfulness? She's being you got to let it go. It's going to hurt you. Really? Let's see. Nobody's asked me for forgiveness. Nobody's offered to help. Everybody covers the thing up. Everybody supports her. She lives in circumstances, in every case, transportation, housing, luxury, recreation, better than me. With his money, my money. And I'm supposed to let it go, really? And my dad said, don't let it go. And my poor dad, dying in that hospital bed when he didn't need to die from an illness he didn't need to die from. And of course, she's got to tell him, lie at the bottom. It's Alzheimer's that killed him, really. Geez, funny. Guy told me his life story like 6 months before he died. It never got progressively worse. I've already described the circumstances of what determines what's really Alzheimer's. But I knew she was gaslighting and grooming him. You got to be an idiot not to know that. But of course, all these people, and even some, his friends, people who were purportedly my friends, really, nobody helps. Anybody say, Mark, you're sorry you missed the funeral. You were going to be arrested if you went to the funeral. Nobody. So anybody who hears this in closing, if you're not helping me, you're not my friend. If I know you and you've heard this, you're my enemy in a sense. Even Jesus said, those who aren't for me are against me. You're not for the life of my dad before me, which is much infinitely more important than mine and honoring him. And you're not for me. You're not for helping me. Not only to get him justice, but to get my own peace of mind. I shouldn't have to just, I can't turn my hand on unrighteousness, injustice, deceit, hatred, deception, destruction, death. I'm fighting for life every day for not only God, my heavenly Father, but the angelic kingdom, the animal kingdom, and even human beings, most of whom I don't even get along. I don't talk to. Nobody gets along with me anymore. I'm just, cast off. And I said, you know what? You're going to kill my father. You're basically going to kill me. And that's fine. They can all go to hell. I don't mean them, the evil spirits in them. But I'm getting justice from my dad one way or another. So I'll keep publicizing it. I'll keep writing about it. I'll keep using the freedom of the press. My voice, I wish it was bigger. I did. The other thing I want to mention is I did this thing on CNN. So, they cut out a lot of the stuff about my dad. They didn't cut out a lot about it, but they just wanted to. And I like the reporter, but we agreed to let him throw me under the bus, basically. But it talked about, like who's in charge in a relationship. And the Bible's clear about it. The man is the leader. He leads the woman to God. And, she supports the man. And he brings them both of them closer to God. But not the way this female empowerment is. And women, number two, always trying to be number one and coercively doing it. And, a coup and subversively. Rather than being, the worst word for women, being, submissive or being obedient. And, of course, this one wasn't. She cultishly controlled my dad for money. And because, like my dad said, she was an abuser. I mean, couldn't even have a critter because, like Mark, she won't spend the money on it, the animal. And I'm afraid for the animal's life. She was always trying to kill animals up at his property. My father, who adored animals, the last 35 years of his life, no animals in his life. No doggy, no kitty. Had horses. He was, setting salt licks out for the deer. I was there. I had to even save a raccoon they were going to capture and kill. She was going to make him capture and kill under the pool house. I have photos of it. I'm not going to put them up here, but they're somewhere. But God is my witness, and I stayed up there to save this poor little raccoon. But anyway, so having said that, that's basically the update. So I'm going to do whatever I need to get done. If it costs Joseph his job at Credit Control, her biggest supporter, or being, the Parimutuel Association, I gave him every opportunity to, do right, more so than just financially, but, in a brotherly sense. But he said, I'd rather have her as whatever she is to him now. I don't know. Showed me his will. He wants to give her $800,000 at least of his will. Really? For what? Beating up and likely